Welcome or welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people where we speak about critical issues in the blindness community and all other issues from across the universe and galaxy. Nolan Parish joins us again, a proud repeat offender here at Aaron's Opinion. I've come to understand that you have a lot to share with us today about a lot of new things that you're working on in the podcast space and radio shows and everything like that. So my first question to kind of help you to get started. So again, who is Nolan Parish? And if you can remind people who you are in one sentence, I think that would be a good place to start. And then you can kind of walk through the projects you're working on and what's happening now in your life. So go right ahead. What's going on?
Hello, everyone. My name is Nolan Parish. As Aaron Richmond said, I am blind and visually impaired. I'm also cognitive impairment. I do not have autism. However, I have been blind since when I was a baby due to an eye surgery that affected one of my eyes. I cannot see, print, and I cannot read print. However, I can see shadows and I can tell when it's light or dark.
Right. Okay, good. Excellent. Okay. So you do a lot with internet radio. So why don't you talk about, how you got started into internet radio, how it works today, and exactly what you're doing in the internet radio space now? Why don't you kind of break that all down for us?
Yes, absolutely. So I now work on an internet-based radio station called 95 Alive, the International Lizard Network, owned by DJ Liz, herself as known as Queen Liz on Facebook. Funny enough, I filled out an application on 95live.net. As of right now, their website is down, but they do have a Team Talk server that you can join. She also has a Listen Live link, which I was going to share via email with you yesterday, but I did not get that. But what I can do is I will get that to you today so we can put that in the episode description. So if anyone wants to listen, they can. That would be great.
Right. Very good. So what do you know about 95 Alive, by the way? It's a very interesting station. What do you know about that?
So what I know from experience when I was, they run shows on different days and different schedules. So basically, my show runs from 1 until 3 Eastern. It's called the Nolan and Friends Radio Show. Basically, what this is where I play music from different kinds of genres, from 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, so on and so forth, all the way to 2010s, 2020s, and new music. In the near future, when I do my radio shows, I am probably going to have interviews on my shows, but I am going to talk a little bit about my blindness and why I became blind, and I think that would be great. And I am also considering featuring some of the blindness music content in the blind community as well on some of my future shows. The way I get music now is I go on Spotify, and I have a Spotify account that works with this, and I go into an application called the Armor Spotify Music Converter. What this application does, and there's two versions of it. There's a Windows version, and then there's a Mac version. The Mac version, which I have, converts the songs to MP3. However, you can get a Spotify Premium to limit the ads, but there is a workaround in DRM Spotify Music Converter. To do this, you go into your preferences and you navigate to an area called General in your settings under Archive Tracks by. It's set to none by default, but you can change it. One of the settings I have it set to is Archive Tracks by Artist. And that makes it very easily identifiable. And when I import my music into the library in Apple Music on the Mac, I have to go and get some of the metadata information, like the track, the year, and the genre that it belongs to, and put it in the correct way so it identifies it and gets the album artwork for each artist. Yep, and then I go on to the 95 Live, the International Lizard Network Team Talk server, and I go into my broadcast channel, which is the Parish Palooza channel, that one of the admin users set up for me in the broadcast channel. I went in there, and the first time I tried uploading, it dawned on me when trying to do so, I got an error. Usage disk succeeded, which caused an issue, but that was fixed. And I'm glad I was able to upload music, and I've been working. And the good news is, the Nolan and Friends radio show is also being syndicated on Super Hit Mix Radio also.
Okay, well, very good. This all sounds excellent. You know, we here at Aaron's Opinion, we actually have a playlist that I can give you. And the playlist is all of the other blind musicians who I've interviewed or who have disabilities. I've interviewed a lot of musicians. And I actually put together a playlist on Spotify. I'll certainly send you that. And that will be an excellent, excellent playlist for you to play on your show, because all of those songs support people who are blind or who have a disability. So that would be really good. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think I might do that next week as we speak.
That would be good. That would be good. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that'd be really awesome to support others within the blind community. I'm also going to be in the process of, because of the situation, I am considering being, I want to be there for others within the blind community and help them as a friend, because there may be some emotional things that they may be going through. And I think we all, as a blind community, need to get together and help sort some things out together without trying to hurt each other and put each other down. If that makes sense.
Sure, absolutely. And this is a constant problem within the blindness community, that a lot of times we don't always support each other the way we should, and that this is a huge problem. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think we all need to get together, and I think we need to support one another. Sometimes we need to, not let each other down, per se, and I won't go into that here in the recording, but it'll be discussed privately off the recording.
Sure.
Because there's additional information that may need to be discussed that we need to be careful of.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is a very big problem, and that I also see this around the community too, is that people are not always knowing how to be appropriately supportive of each other. And this is becoming a bigger problem. Yes,
especially
definitely.
On Visioncast Network, I'm seeing a lot of issues with that, and where I had an incident that happened a week before last week, and I'll tell you about that when we're off air.
Right.
When we're done recording.
Sure. So some people here might be sort of new to the concept of internet radio, right? So if someone doesn't really know what internet radio is, what would you tell them? What is internet radio?
Internet radio is a space where you can be a DJ and someone can help produce music for you, or you can produce music of your own and host your own radio show. There are stations out there like you can check out, like 2020 The Beacon and 98.6 The Mix, which I tried running my show on. I am actually considering of going back to working on 2020 The Beacon soon, probably the end of March or the end of April, the first week of May, probably depending on what my schedule is going to be like.
Right.
Because if I do syndicate my show with 2020 The Weekend and 98.6 The Mix, I'm going to have to be very, very wise about the choice of content that I play.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So how does that work? You know, when you're on these radio shows, when you have a show on an internet station, right? How do you decide what content to air out? Yeah.
It's very I play like so it depends on what songs I choose. So basically I go I go on on my Spotify playlist I have built, and I update that and add new music. So I choose songs that I like to listen to and add those in, but I gotta be real careful because I don't want to get a copyright strike. I almost got a copyright strike from Spotify because my first podcast episode for the radio show on the Nolan and Friends radio show podcast feed got taken down. So that's why they don't allow it. They only allow video and audio podcasts, not podcast episodes that have music in them.
Right, sure. Well, let's talk about that, right? I mean,
yeah,
you know, it's important to know what the difference between internet radio and a podcast is, right? So with internet radio, it's about the listeners per hour is what it's about.
Right. Yes.
A podcast is actually about how many people download the show, about how many downloads, right? That's what it's always about. The number of downloads over a period of time equals how powerful the show is, basically, when people are willing to save the show and come back to it. That gives each download is a vote, basically. So yeah, that's how it works. And Spotify might not want music or complete tracks to be played. Yeah, I mean, I can understand where that would cause some issue. Sure, definitely.
Yeah. And that's why, because that's why I need to not, with the immersed Spotify Music Converter, it will allow you to use and play music on your personal devices, but there are certain things you got to be a little bit careful of, such as if you were to play it on, because I was told by one of the ACB community members through American Council of the Blind that I need to double check with the owner of 95 Alive to make sure that it's okay to play Spotify songs that have been converted to MP3, because I don't want to get in trouble.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you just have to know what that the difference is that on an internet radio station, you would have more freedom probably to play tracks from Spotify. Whereas on a podcast, I'm not sure. I mean, I can understand. I mean, Nolan, I understand the frustration, but I also understand where they would take down an episode, because if they feel that you're using too much of the track or something like that, then they would probably want to feel that it's just too much. Yeah.
Right. That makes perfect sense, and I see where this is going.
So I would say moving forward, right? I would say that if you're going to use a Spotify track from the Spotify information, from the playlist I'll give you, if you take any of those tracks, right, and you play them on your show, but you want people to download the podcast episode after the fact, I would say that would be a question for an editor. You need to say, look, we're only going to play 7 seconds of the song or 5 seconds or whatever it is. I'm sure that there's a way of researching the amount of time that you're allowed to play a song.
Okay.
I was under the impression, I could be completely confused. It wouldn't be the first time, but I was under the impression that any song that's between 5 and 7 seconds long is allowed. You can have a little snippet for about 7 seconds of what it sounds like. Right.
Okay.
But after that, they feel that it's too much. Mm-hmm.
Right. That makes perfect sense.
Right. So I would say research it extensively and figure out, okay, how long can I play the song for? You know, right? What's the maximum and what are the minimums here that I need to be able to meet? There's probably other rules and regulations too, right? Probably.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Interesting. Okay. All right.
Yep.
Have you ever interviewed Queen Liz yourself?
Not on my podcast, no, but I am thinking about bringing her on and interviewing her. I'm going to see if I can schedule a time so that her and I can both sit down together and do a podcast episode together, and I can...
Yeah, Liz is an amazing person to have in your corner. And I remember the episode with her here at Aaron's Opinion, and she did a remarkably magnificent job of conveying her backstory and conveying the whole lizard part and, you know, the whole story of how it developed into what it is.
I'm gonna be honest with you. She's a very good friend, and I'm going to, and as time goes on, I think I am going to be continuing working with her because she is a one-of-a-kind friend that I will look up to.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to do like what she does, where she, works with friends who may need help, who may need like how to properly socialize with people, and
Right.
how to teach them, like, okay, what's going on here? What exactly? How do we handle this? How do we accomplish this without hurting each other?
Mm-hmm. Right. And this is something that I've seen across the podcast space is that people, in many cases want to be helpful, but we oftentimes from time to time can get in our own way. And that does tend to be a pretty recurring scene that I have been seeing. Yes, you're very right.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And also cutting people off and throwing people and throwing people off the podcast, that's a no-no. You don't do that.
Right.
And I've been seeing that a lot lately, especially the week before last week.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, the other thing with podcasts that is also a very subtle thing and a very important thing is that you have to find the podcast that's right for you. Not every podcast is going to be an appropriate podcast for you to present on. Not every podcast is set up a little differently, so not all the time. You'd be surprised. Everybody has to find their perfect podcast for them, So yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I find it very difficult because there's, I find it very difficult for me to try to return back to VisionCast, and the people, VisionCast now won't let me come back because Liz is trying to help me. She's trying to prevent this from happening as a friend, and they won't listen to her. They're not following her instructions.
Okay.
Which is a safety problem, I think.
So I can tell you a little bit more off air what I think. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because it's not right to, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's not right to cut people off. Mm-hmm. And you gotta, because they don't like that, so it's best that next time going forward, if I were to come back, I need to listen, let others speak, and then chime in. And if there's a problem, then I need to speak up.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I can't just walk off the list like that. I need to speak up on the mailing list and say, hey, this isn't right here. What's going on?
Yeah, definitely.
What can I do? What can I do to help?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, but that's it's also important to know how to practice being on podcasts, I mean, and this is a common question that is asked, what makes a good podcast guest? The answer is it depends on the podcast. Some people want podcast guests who talk a lot. Other times they want people who do more listening than talking. Other times they want more of a dynamic interview style like what we're doing. In other cases, I've had people come here and do long form where I let the person talk. In your case, given the situation, you need more of an interaction. A lot of times I'm able to, and it's totally fine, but a lot of times I'm able to just sit back and let a guest talk about their whole existence. I've had people come to this show where I say, who is so-and-so? And I mute my microphone for like an hour and a half and just let them talk. I've done that, So that's pretty important to realize. Every podcast has a different flavor and a different audience, and some are just geared towards a different audience. And it's really nothing. It should never be taken personally. Okay.
No, it shouldn't. You're right.
And none of this is personal, but not every podcast is perfect for everybody.
No.
So you have to find what's exactly right. And what we do here at Aaron's Opinion, by the way, is in fact, at least by my estimation, quite unusual, actually, because a lot of other podcasts are a lot harder to get on. There's much more of a barrier to entry. And, quite frankly, with me, the barrier to entry is I have to see that you're doing the right thing. I have to see that you're a good person who's doing the right thing in the blindness community, who has an interesting thing to talk about. That's what I look for. I generally, although I've done it before, I generally don't tell I generally never say that you cannot be on my podcast. It would take a lot for me to say I'm not interested. Mostly I'm interested. And quite frankly, my problem is I'm too interested in too many people too much of the time and have far too many and I mean this in a good way. Most other podcasts would do a lot more filtering, and I don't really filter because I don't filter me, you see. So that's why this might be a perfect platform for a lot of people to come into and to be able to talk about what's important for them, but not all the time and not in every single way. Every podcast is different. Yeah. So definitely.
And I get the picture, and I feel confident enough to come forward and say, you know what, I am interested in helping out those that are struggling. What can I do in the blindness space to help those that need help? And what can I do as a friend to support them if I was a team admin on Queen Liz's Team Talk server? What can I do to help?
Well, one of the things that I think can be done, and I think it's something that is oftentimes overlooked, right? One thing that you can do, and this is a great question, Nolan, that you posed to me philosophically, rhetorically, that can be posed to the greater audience, which is that a lot of times people ask me, well, what can I do if I like your podcast, Aaron? What can I do about it? And I say, well, the first most obvious thing is you can set these episodes to download. Simply downloading the content is a huge way to say thank you. That's one thing. The other thing is to show a genuine interest in what they do, right? I have a genuine interest in what you do, Nolan, right? And you can tell that because I asked you about your show, right? If you ask somebody, well, why are you interested in working with me, or why are you interested in what I do, right? And if they don't really respond, if they if they don't really say, if they say something sort of generic or vague and they say, oh, well, you're just a nice guy and I want to work with you, that means no. That means they really aren't interested, right? But
Right.
if somebody comes to you and you ask them, so why are you interested? And they say, well, I've heard that you have this great radio show called Nolan and Friends, and I really appreciate the music you play, and I want to have a great conversation with you about your show and how it fits into the structure of our lives and society. That's an active interest. I tell people all the time. I say,
Yes.
do you want to be I would tell people, right? Do you want to be a passive listener of Aaron's opinion? Or do you want to be an active listener of Aaron's opinion, right? For active people like you get the card with all the links and all the social plugs, and you can be on the Discord server for free because we have a free tier let me say that again. You can be on the, what's it called now? Patreon. Yeah, you can be on the Patreon. You can be on the Patreon for Aaron's opinion, and we have a free tier on the Patreon that people can be on. And that's a great way to get involved, right? Because you'll always see the episode right when we have the conversation. And the fact is, it's a very subtle thing, right? When you give someone a product that they want for free, when you give someone the right thing for free, they're certainly more likely to pay for it in the future. Probably not, more than likely not. But if people consistently see that you're consistently doing your best and consistently producing the best thing you can possibly do over a period of time, right? Then people start to think, oh, maybe I should consider signing up for $5 a month. Either way, on Patreon, when you join it for free, you'll be able to see every new interview we conduct first when it comes out on the Patreon for free. Now, you have to be a member. So I don't do public posting on the Patreon, but you have to at least be a free member to absorb this content right when it comes out. And I think that's, on my part, I think that's actually overly generous because most people who are Patreon creators, most of the time they charge for they charge people to see the content ahead of time because the lure, I guess, or the draw is that with Patreon you can supposedly, depending, and not supposedly, it's definitely true, from creator to creator, you can see stuff before anybody else does. So it's like a sneak peek, right?
Yes.
And usually you have to pay for a sneak peek, usually. And I don't disagree with that. I think if a creator is doing the right thing and they want to charge charge you to see their stuff before anyone else does. Well, quite frankly, it takes a lot of energy, and effort and things. Too. Yeah, absolutely. So that's not the end of the world, No. But I think given our audience demographic as mostly people with disabilities, I think that it's very fair for me to let people see it for free as long as they're a member of the Patreon. Yeah. There you go. That was a great plug for the Patreon. Yeah. Come to think of it.
Yes. It really interests us. I'm interested in, and I'm interested in a lot of stuff.
Sure.
And I am, and I agreed with Queen Liz, and she thinks that I'm a nice person, and
you certainly are.
And she is too, and we both work together.
Oh, yeah.
And I like her enthusiasm. She makes me smile from ear to ear, and it brings
absolutely. Queen Liz is amazing. I don't know her as well as you, and we've only really spoken seriously one time, really. I mean, we've spoken off and on Messenger, but that's so insightful that you say that because mostly her episode. This is going to come out funny. Her episode was actually really depressing and actually really sad because she told the whole sad story behind the lizard part.
Oh, no.
And she told the whole story, which was really moving and really saddening and really, really depressing, actually. But then, of course, it resolves in a happy way, and she explains how she had the strength to create the station that you're now using, the 95 Alive thing. And, and so, overall, she kind of explains herself in that way. So it's good to know that people can put a smile on your face because not all the time. They don't always do that. And what I mean is it's not that they're bad people or that they make me unhappy. No. It's just some of these stories we've covered here at Aaron's Opinion, and you know it to be true, Not every
Yes,
episode is happy
definitely.
around here. We've actually covered some painfully saddening stories.
Oh, yes, because I was
Yeah,
listening to one of the podcast episodes yesterday that you done with Zach.
yeah, that
It
was
was very
very.
painful.
That's a very good way of that was a very good way of expressing it, Nolan. It was very painful, but the way I can express it is I'm proud to know that I did the best I could to help Zach do the best he can.
Yes.
And you know,
And
he
I think
yeah,
I'm going to support him one way or another, and I'm going to be there for him as not only
no,
as a
it's very
friend, but I'm gonna help him out because I think he
oh
needs someone that
indeed.
is gonna talk to him because that's kind of hard to go through a lot of these things.
Yeah, that's really hard to go through because this conversation is kind of taking an interesting twist. I didn't know we'd be covering this today.
Yes.
Because that's the beauty of podcasting, man, is that we can cover we can actually talk now I will say that Zach's beautiful, serious and saddening story, right? The other factor that we have to be cognizant of, and this is a good segue to talk about it
Yes,
within the blindness
absolutely.
space, is that
Yes.
you have to be, and I'm talking to myself, the Aaron guy, and I'm also talking to the Nolan guy, and I'm going to say
Yeah.
that we have to be very, very careful when we talk to people who became blind later on in life.
Oh,
Okay?
absolutely. And I agree with
Because
you.
that's a totally different ball game. Okay?
Right.
Now, I don't want to mention it because it's kind of depressing. So it's kind of
Yes.
serious and it's not appropriate to mention it again. Like I said,
Right.
I really think that yesterday's episode was enough for yesterday's episode. I think that did it justice. I think that did it. Um,
Yes.
and
I
and I don't
agree.
think I don't think we neither need to be afraid of it, nor do we need to overstress the point. If you want the episode, if you're at home wondering what it was, well, send me a message and let me know that you want to hear that episode. But it was the one of the episodes that came out, released on, the third of the episode that if you go to our chart on Apple or Spotify or YouTube, it's the one that was around the 3rd of March for you listening to this one. But the point that's important to remember here is that when you become blind as an adult, however you did it, and Zach's story is certainly different and obviously extreme, but regardless, it's hard. How
Yeah,
do
it's
I
hard to explain.
how do I convey this? And I don't think it's always fair for me to convey this, but I think what I've
No.
come to understand is that people who become blind later, because they were born sighted and then became blind, feel that they're never really blind. That's kind
Yes.
of the thing. They're never really somebody who was born with a disability. And
Right.
that's really overwhelming for them. And that's why you got that
It really
impression.
is.
And that's why you got that impression that other guests have really struggled emotionally more than you and I would. I don't struggle with
Yeah.
blindness. I struggle with society. Once a
I
comedian who happens to be blind, and we're going to have a comedian come up to the show at some point pretty soon. I'm giving you a little bit of a teaser, but probably a comedian. I've interviewed one of those, and he's coming up right around the corner too. And one of the other funny things about being blind is a lot of times people will say, oh my God, Aaron, you're amazing. You've done all these things. Oh my God, you're amazing. And I just want to say what I generally say, okay, thank you, glad to know that. But what I really want to say and tell these people is, no, I really think that the amazing part is how much my blindness has an effect on you, considering that you're not even blind. That's the amazing part. How it's like these people, who are sighted don't really understand and then they think it's amazing. Well, yeah, it is amazing. It's amazing how much my blindness influences you. Yes, that part's amazing. So, yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's
And
the amazing part.
yeah, and I understand where you're coming from, and I feel that, my family does very well remarkable job of protecting me, because there are going to be times later in life where I'm not going to have my parents
Right.
around, because there are
Sure.
going to be times
Mm-hmm.
later in life where society might hit me head first, and it may get dangerous later in life.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I think this is a good place to mention that. You know, we all have these fears about society. Would you like to share
Yes.
with me some of your concerns moving forward about the future of society and things? Because I think that's a valid statement to make. What are some of your concerns? Mm-hmm.
My main concern is not being able to communicate with friends and moving away from friends down the road, which eventually might happen, but
Mm-hmm.
it'd be kind of hard because of right now. It's how do I put this? Um, I think it's hard because of how how I see things through my heart,
Sure, sure. Mm-hmm.
and not only that, but it's also difficult because I do things by hearing it with audio. That's how I
Mm-hmm.
communicate with people. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how I associate with people.
Mm-hmm.
And there are going to be times later in life where we might not be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
And there are going to be times where things can get very, very, very stressful and
Mm-hmm.
very difficult, especially for those within the blind community that are facing tough challenges like me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's important too. And another thing I forgot to mention, how I prepare my radio shows.
Oh, sure.
Now, on Super Hit Mix Radio and or on 95 Live, I I sync the music that I have on my computer to my phone, and I use an app called Backpack Studio.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I record my voice
Backpack's great.
breaks. Yes, record my voice breaks in between songs, and then I read out the songs out loud and in the recording, and and then I check and make sure that what artist it's from. Then it will tell me in when I pull up the iTunes part, and then once that has read verbally to me, then I put that into whatever sound pad number it
Mm-hmm.
belongs to, and then I chain the sound pads together, and then once all that's done, then I start recording it all into one file.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And that's how podcast episodes are recorded too, is I put all these files together, and that's what gives the idea that it's a full conversation, is by putting them together and allowing the software backpack to record it all and kind of sync it all in. Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's how we do things differently and nowadays. Because
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I can see that.
Right.
Because I think that I'm hoping that God can help guide me in the near future,
Mm-hmm.
because I want to help those that have who are blind or have multiple types of disabilities. Because I have a friend who graduated from a school that graduated couple years after me,
Mm-hmm.
who is working with someone with disability, working with some kids that have disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, she graduated from here, from a school here in the state of Michigan. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to tell you this on the podcast because of privacy concerns, because I don't want to. But yeah, anyway, that's my backstory behind how I got started with internet radio. And also in the recording, when you have a chance to listen to my show, sometimes I give out the Google Voice number that I have attached to my Google account. Also, that is used for the purpose of my radio show so that people can reach out to me that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be the easiest, convenient way for them to get in touch with me through text and or through email at my personal email address.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, it's really good to have a professional set of links that you can easily, you should always, as I tell anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody comes up to me in the podcast space, right, and they say, "Well, what's your show called? What can you tell me?" I should be able to pull, and I can, within 2 seconds, I should be able to email you a paragraph with all of my links. So that's
Yes.
that's one of the skills that you have to develop as a broadcaster. You have to be able to say, well, if somebody comes up to me, right, just all of a sudden, hey man, where can I get more information, right? You should be able to, and you should, by the way, create a WA business, a WhatsApp business for your show, or for at least for you. You should have a business number on WhatsApp. And so that can be
Okay.
done through Google Voice. And and what I did was I took the Google Voice number that I created for Aaron's Opinion, and I said, well, what would happen if I just created a WhatsApp business number with that number? And the software
Yeah.
works. So that's how you create a business number. You create a Google Voice, right?
I might try that this week.
Yeah. Now, and I don't think that's really anything to me. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I
Right.
needed a business number, and WA Business accepted the number, so it all worked. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Definitely, it is a very fascinating thing, that you can easily create. And then after you create a WA business, then you have a link. And then what I tend to do with people is I say, well, okay, here's my link. Here's my card. Can you just contact me here? And so what I tend to do, and what I would suggest, is what you have noted, is that it's important to let other people come up to you, right?
Right.
Not the other way around. Now, I don't know. A lot of podcasters struggle with this. If I say my email address, and this is another great plug for the show, is aaronsopinion6@gmail.com, AARONSOPINION6. That's the number 6 at gmail.com. And they say, well, no, I want you to email me. I'm, Joe Schmo at such and such and such, then you're probably wondering, well, should I just email them even though that I gave out my address? I don't really know. I tend to think, and this is an opinion, and please disagree with me in the comments below, but I tend to think that for a creator to email people initially is
Right.
not always appropriate. It's almost always okay if someone says, can you tell, if someone emails you, if you receive information from somebody else and they say, hey, Nolan and friends, I got to figure out where I can get that show, man. Nolan, where do I find it? Then it's always okay to reply. Almost always okay to reply, unless you know that the person who's sending that email is emailing you maliciously. But the reality of it all is, in the industry these days, the majority of people are so overwhelmed and so busy with their own lives and their own problems that I've come to understand that almost all of the time, if somebody emails me or sends me a message about the show, it's usually legitimate, almost always. Because if you're just there to play around or fool around, you aren't going to have the patience to go through all the hoops, to jump through all those hoops.
Right.
You just won't, So that's kind of my thing. Yeah.
And I'm glad I took some time yesterday to get stuff prepared.
Good.
And it took me a little bit. Because,
so what did you prepare? Mm-hmm.
So what I did is I took the I had to resend you the iCloud download link because apparently
let's talk about that, by the way. So I noticed that you did send me that, and I did receive it, and I was honestly, as we all get, last night I was busy, as we all are, doing other podcasts. But yes, I did receive all the emails. So, but what I was wondering, so that iCloud link, or that audio that you sent, is that an entire one of your shows? Is that a clip of a show? Like, what is it exactly?
It's the entire show that I wanted to share with you.
That's good that you did it. I'm
Yes,
wondering, could you say, are you, okay, here's a homework assignment for you, right?
sure.
You know I'm a teacher, right? So we give homework,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So Nolan, could you send me just 30 seconds of that? Or could you clip and maybe send a 10 to 15-second clip of that? Um, because I think
Yeah,
that would be a
because
good way for me to introduce the show. Yeah.
yes, I can. There's a way for me to
It's
do
really
that.
easy in WhatsApp, by the way. Do you know how to send audio through WhatsApp? It's really easy.
Yes, I
It's
can.
ridiculously easy. That's the easiest way to do it. I tend to think that the mail way is the harder way to do it, you know?
Yeah, because it asks me to use mail drop.
Yeah. WhatsApp is just easier to use. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I can put it like I can tell it to like I'll record it.
So what I would like is a clip, right? Because it's
Yes.
good for me to be able to say, right? In today's episode of Aaron's Opinion, we're going to hear from and Nolan, and here's a little clip of what's to come, and then push pause and then say, okay, here's what he's going to sound like in his radio show, and that will give people a good taste of who you are in maybe just 5 to 10 seconds, or a good 10 to 15 second clip of
Yes.
what they could hear.
Yeah.
I think
So
that would
as a
be
matter of
very
fact,
good.
I do have one of these clips, and I do.
Generally, and which is good, and generally, yeah. I mean, if you can send me clips. So generally, as we geeking out about podcast stuff, generally, just to help you to be safe in the podcast space, it's not a problem that you sent me the whole show, but I would say moving forward, please don't do that. Only reason is that somebody could intercept that information and then somehow try to manipulate that audio without me even realizing. So you got to be a little bit cautious about sending audio, right?
Yep, that makes sense.
That's why on the new Patreon concept or things like that, that's why we are only posting when we post a video, it's an unlisted video because there has to be some filtration and some restriction, or else the content would just leak out too much. So you have to balance it out. You have to walk the fine line between the two. You know, that's very tricky. Yeah,
Yep.
definitely.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely
Oh man.
grab
Yeah.
the and so like what I did is I took what I wrote in notes
hmm
and converted it to MP3 using 11 Labs.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yes, and I used one of their voices, one of their American voices by the name of Adam, to introduce the Nolan and Friends radio show intro. And
Cool.
what I will do, as soon as we're done here, I will jump on WhatsApp and I will jump over on WhatsApp and I will privately send you that audio file.
Well, maybe if it's just 10 to 15 seconds, that's what I'm saying. I only want a 10 to
Yes.
15-second clip, just a little teaser, a little snippet.
Hmm.
And this can really present a really good framework for a
Yes.
podcast episode because people, I mean, in addition to hearing us talk, they also like some flavor. They also like to hear other audio effects and other things like that. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. That's really good.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. So, how many episodes of your radio show, Nolan and Friends, have you actually like published, and how many episodes are already out?
So the first one was a so from the for the radio show itself or the actual podcast itself?
Either
Yes.
way, you can answer both in either way.
Okay, so the radio show is pre-recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, and I email it to Donald Brown, and
Uh-huh.
he airs it on Super Hit Mix Radio. The first time I did it, there was a little bit of silence,
Mm-hmm.
so it took me a couple of weeks to figure out, okay, what can I do to cut down on the silence?
Right.
So I went into the Backpack Studio settings and adjusted the sliders for the clip time fade time, and moved it to 4.00,
Right.
which means that would minimize the gaps in the sentence.
Yeah. It's tricky because a lot of podcasters edit out their ums and uhs and pauses. And I know why they do that, because it does
Okay.
sound better without ums, uhs, and pauses. But with a natural conversation, you're supposed to be saying and Like a lot of times when people take a public speaking class, they say, don't say and but actually saying and knowing when to say that is a feature of speaking with fluency. So fluent people say that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I get the picture of
Good.
what that's like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, given 95 Alive is a international station now, I haven't really checked in much and I haven't really asked Queen Liz a whole lot of questions, but what can you tell us about the audience of your show? So a lot of times podcasters will ask me, or I'll ask other podcasters, so who's your real audience? And this is a huge thing, right? This is the most important question of all the questions you can ask yourself. The question you should ask is, who really is your audience? Mm-hmm.
It really depends on who the listeners are, and
Right.
who are tuning in. It's hard to tell because I don't currently have access to the listen data to determine, because Liz does, so I'll have to ask her.
And that's not quite, and that's okay, Nolan. That's not quite what I'm asking. What I mean is, who is your intended audience group? In other words, some podcasts are directed at old people. Some are directed at younger people. Some are directed at women or men or a certain part of the world. It's not about what has been your demographic, but who do you think would most likely listen to Nolan and Friends?
I would say probably my family,
Good. Okay. Excellent. That's an excellent answer.
My friends.
Right. That's an excellent answer. Why? Because you just told me that you're family oriented and that you care about people. That's a really brilliant response to that, right?
Yes.
So then you'll attract other people who care. That's a very subtle thing. Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if they go on to the, for example, if they go on to the International Radio Network Facebook page, they can put song requests up there, and then one of the producers can help me.
Sure. Absolutely.
Read out who put in that request.
I do know that I'm not as. Do you know our great friend in the Aaron's Opinion family? Do you know Jenny Sukan?
No, I do not.
Oh, she's incredible. So she produces a classical music show on a radio station, on an internet station too. And she's really deeply knowledgeable about the use of technology within a radio station. And she can really tell you, how to make use of certain technology and certain chat software and certain things to keep track of the audience and things like that. One thing that I consistently hear, though, about internet radio, and it's not just you, everybody tells me it takes a lot of practice. Practice. There's a lot of facets to it. It's not just one software, because what we're doing, in essence, is the easiest part of the episode. The actual talking is the easiest part. Okay, with an internet radio station, you're doing more multitasking, or really, in essence,
or preparing for a show per se.
Right, precisely. Whereas, it all depends on exactly what's going on. So, Nolan, you've actually done really well today, and I think that this really covers it, given the whole extent of the situation. I think that if you feel like we've covered everything about your new great show and everything you're doing, so to kind of walk towards the end of a conversation, right? What are some other great stuff you've been doing just in your life in general? How's life going in general? Never mind the radio.
my life has been going very good,
Okay.
and I've
Mm-hmm.
been staying busy, going to different events and things with my youth group, and I won't say it on air because
Right.
on the podcast because of the
Mm-hmm.
privacy.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Right.
But yeah,
Right. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I find that pretty easy
Mm-hmm.
because there's people to get used to listening to nowadays too. Because I kind of get the feeling of how people run their shows, especially on 95 Live. And
Yeah.
right before I got started, and I'll tell you this, before I got started, I started kind of getting the feel of how Danny, DJ Daniel himself, um,
Mm-hmm.
does his show. So
Sure.
he showed me through audio how he runs his show and
Mm-hmm.
how he produces it. So he gave me an example, played it for
Mm-hmm.
me, and showed me how that was done when I was up on their Team Talk server.
Yeah, yeah. You do a lot with Team Talk. I've never done. We at Aaron's Opinion, we don't really use Team Talk at all. We just do WhatsApp, and we technically
Right,
also have Discord, although nobody uses it really. I mean, we do. I mean, Preston will post in there. I'll post in there, but I think I don't know. This is an opinion show, so I'm going to give an opinion. I think that Discord has its uses, but when you don't have a lot of people on the server,
right.
it doesn't draw the same way. It's not as attractive.
No,
That's
it
the thing.
doesn't.
It sort of is cool though if you get a big group of people together and they all want to talk like in a voice channel. That can be cool. That can be fun. But it can also
Yeah,
be
that would
very
be perfect.
disorienting. It can be very disorienting though. So you have to be careful about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Well, that's really good, man. That's really excellent, and I think you're someone who, with your blindness and your other stuff that's going on in your life, you know, the bottom line here is Nolan. I think you're doing well. I really do. I think that you have some frustrations, and I think you're overcoming a lot of stuff, and I think you're doing the best that you can. You know, as a famous line goes in a famous song, and I've used this phrase to express a lot of points in life, which is that humility is one of our greatest weapons of strength. You know, how humble somebody can be, how much somebody can care about other people, that because people notice when you care, you know.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, people notice more subconsciously, meaning people secretly notice more than they outwardly notice. But when you care, when you take ownership of your product, when you take ownership of who you are as a person, people know. And they don't have
Yes.
to think if you care. Do I think your life is easy? No. Is my life easy? No. Is doing what we do easy? No. But you love it. You care.
Yes.
And now that you're in my community at Aaron's Opinion more, you're learning more about the WhatsApp groups. You're learning more about how we can connect you with more people. So in other words, now when you have your radio show, you should post links to the show in the groups. And then you'll have more listeners from other countries that will tune in and give more of a pull on the station from all the different countries that could tune in. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely. I
Absolutely.
might do that this week. As a matter of
Absolutely.
fact, and I might actually post
You
the
should.
listen link
You
so that
absolutely can. Please do it. Because
okay.
we have Latabo in there, our great buddy Latabo. He'll help you out. He's another broadcaster. We have a lot of broadcasters in
Holy
the areas.
moly!
We have a lot of them, and they all do it online. Now the other thing that you have to be cognizant of and aware of is just like everybody runs a podcast differently, right?
Right,
Everybody runs an internet radio station differently. There's no right way. There's different software that's used. There's different methodologies. There's different ways of getting there. So
right.
you might say, oh, well, here's how I do Nolan and Friends. And somebody might come back and say, what? That's crazy. Well, here's how I do my show. Well, why are you doing it that way? The easy way to do it is this way. Well, no. The easy way to do it is for you to figure out how you can do it and take
Right.
ownership of it and take ownership and say,
Yes.
well, guess what? This is my show. I care about you. Do you care about me? That is Nolan and Friends on Aaron's
Yes.
Opinion. There you go. So you see, that's what you can do. Connect with more people. practice your craft, practice your product, right? Build it
Yes.
up, right? Play the music that I'll give you. Generally, I think it's always easier on WhatsApp. I will WhatsApp you a Spotify playlist.
Okay.
And you can play that stuff on your show, right?
Okay.
Now, like we talked before, you'll have to do some editing of the podcast. This is why I've noticed over the years that typically people go in either direction. They either have a podcast or an internet radio show, but it's hard to do both because of the
At
formatting.
the same time. Yeah.
It's hard to get it just right so that it could be done without creating a clash. The tricky thing with Aaron's opinion is each episode is a different amount of time. Some episodes are longer. Yours is slightly shorter. Yours is still wonderful. Some episodes are very long and are wonderful.
Right.
Some are very technical, where we've played music and paused. And I had one guy on here where I actually recorded 2 episodes with the guy for 3 hours. I did hour and a half about one topic, and then we stopped for a bathroom break, and then we cleared our throat and did another hour and a half, and then we paused it again and stopped it. And he loved doing it, but I'm pretty convinced that at the end of it, when I said thank you for the last time and let him hang up, I think he was really happy, because that was to him getting him to talk for 3 hours. That was a lot of fun. He was probably thinking, boy, that's a great podcast, but boy, am I glad that recording session is over, because that was a lot to go through.
Yes.
Some people, and some people again, man, and some people have, everybody has a different flavor, which is why podcasting, some radio stations can put podcasts on the station, but it's kind of tricky because each thing is different.
Yes,
That's why it's tricky. Where with radio, it used to be about, well, what's your main script? Radio, do you know, I could ask you if you know a lot of different people. You probably don't, or maybe you've heard of them. Do you know Luke Kolb?
I don't know if I know.
Oh, he is so sweet, such a sweet, and such a strong friend, a brilliant, kind, just such a great friend in the blindness community. He worked in radio in real life for like 30 years in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s. And he can take you back to what disc jockeys did a long time ago, man, and how they, put the record on there and tapped it 3 times and, rub your hands together and stuff like that. He'll take you through all the ins and outs of that. That was another person you should talk to. But overall, you should keep networking and things like that. So, of course, Nolan, you did a great job today, as I knew you would. And of course, as we always like to say, so Nolan, if you can ask me only one question to really make me sweat, to see if I'm worth my salt as a podcaster, what do you really want to ask me? One more question.
What is something that you hope that your podcast listeners can learn from me in this episode today?
I hope that my listeners to your episode will learn to be kind.
Yes.
Because we live in a world where so many people are not receptive of people who have other abilities like you, right? You're blind, right? You also have a cognitive disability, right?
Yes.
There's a lot to be learned from you. And the first thing is that we should be kind to others. We should be kind to you. We need to be kind. And we should also want to learn from you. Because apparently, if you have a great radio show where you play great music, well, that sounds like something that's really great and beneficial to anybody.
Yes.
So you see, you can be blind, you can have a cognitive disability, and you can be part of the Aaron's Opinion family and have a great experience here. And I can't promise that everything will happen, and I am not entirely sure exactly what will or won't happen. But I am sure that you're welcome on my podcast, and you're welcome in my Aaron's Opinion family.
Thank you.
I do think people will sort of, and I know you won't take this the wrong way, I do think people will have to kind of get used to you. God knows, people have to get used to Aaron. People have to get used to me.
Yeah.
So I'm something to get used to. With me, you definitely have to get used to it. It's like jumping in the cold side of the pool. When you do that in the summer, and they say, "Oh, you got to get used to it. Hold on tight."
Yes.
Hold on tight. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's what I think they can learn from you, is that they can learn to be kind, and they can also learn that through their kindness, they'll see your value that you produce. And that's why it's important, you know? And
Mm,
you know what? Here's the thing. If people are not kind to you, well, you don't want them listening to your station, you know? So
yeah, that makes
that's the
sense.
reality, you know? Yeah. That's what I think they'll learn. And of course, as we say, click the link in the description for further information about the great Nolan Parish. By the way, I still love that name. That's a beautiful name. It really is. Nolan
Thank
Parish.
you.
That's cool.
Yes,
That's
thank
still a
you.
beautiful artistic name. Sounds like a talk show host or an author of a book or a painter. That's cool. Parish. It's actually a French name, parish.
Yes.
It's actually the French word for county, or it's actually one of the French words that's used to describe an administrative district.
Yeah.
Now it's associated with religious parishes or religious zones or parish, but that's what that name means. It's a
Yes.
very special name to be a parish. That's very unusual and very powerful. Nolan Parish. That's cool.
Hmm.
It's a very memorable thing. So how's that? So I think people should click the link in the description for further information about Nolan and Friends. And until then, I just want to say from my heart to yours, Nolan, thank you for joining us today on Aaron's Opinion. You're forever welcome here. You're always welcome. And until next time, we say, help one person today. And what do we say, Nolan? Help one person today and help
Help million people tomorrow.